As the United States struggles with bailout after bailout, unemployment, the war on terror, health care reform, and a host of other challenges, many Americans are looking for answers. A significant portion believes that government can fix these issues, but there's an inherent problem with that approach. The more power the government accumulates, the less it is accountable to the people it is supposed to serve. And as Lord Acton put it so clearly, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The problems our nation faces didn't happen overnight. They've been building for decades. That is why Americans need to step back and look at what's happened in the past and compare those patterns with what is happening now. As Americans, we need to understand what will happen to our freedom as long as we allow the federal government to centralize more power. Without exception, nations that allowed for that accumulation of power simultaneously accelerated down the path towards totalitarianism. The more power their political leadership accumulated, the more they celebrated their own greatness. The statues or the temples became grander. The heads on the posters got bigger. The leaders' supporters became more militant. The cult of personality had arrived. It has never mattered whether the titles were or are Generalissimo, El Duce, the Fuhrer, Dear Leader, President for Life, or Supreme Leader. They all refer to the same Messiah complex these tyrants inevitably developed. The political leader or the chosen one would save the people from themselves. Their methods were largely the same, differing only in style and label. There is no better textbook example of what havoc a leader with a Messiah complex can cause than in looking at the rise of Nazi Germany and the ascendancy of Adolf Hitler. Due to the conditions in Germany after World War I, the people were prepared for change. Along came an obscure politician named Adolf Hitler who promised the Germans change. He offered hope. He was a captivating and skilled orator. Once Hitler was installed as chancellor, in order for him and his supporters to centralize power, a critical event was staged. The Reichstag was burned. That was the equivalent of our Congress being torched. Certain segments of the population were blamed for it. Those blamed were labeled terrorists. These so-called terrorists were actually Hitler's opposition. They were rounded up and dealt with swiftly. The Reichstag fire set the stage for a national emergency, and the government passed an enabling act designed to centralize police power into the hands of a few. Within a short time after the Reichstag fire, Hitler also took over large sectors of the economy, automobiles and banking, utilities, and the list went on and on. And German troops were forced to pledge to follow Hitler rather than the constitution of the German Reich. A group called the Hitler Youth were organized. Some Germans derisively referred to them as Homo Youth because of the homosexuality so prevalent in their leadership. Many of these youth embraced that same lifestyle. Germans were then forced to volunteer for Hitler's public programs. Commemorative stamps of German volunteers for Hitler's public programs were issued. Hitler's brown shirts were put into place as a civilian security force. Hitler's youth filled the role as well. Not long after that came the Gestapo and the SS. With them, the death camps. Why does this matter to us? For decades, the United States has seen a steady but clear consolidation of power at the federal level, and particularly within the executive branch. After 9/11, like the Reichstag fire, America was quickly on the path toward a police state. Within a few days, the 300-plus page Patriot Act was passed. It had clearly been written before 9/11. Few, if any, members of Congress read the document before voting for it. A Department of Homeland Security was created, pulling a host of federal agencies under one authority, and the war on terror began. Enemy combatants were rounded up and denied due process. In later years, Americans have learned that some have been abused, tortured, and even killed. Americans also learned that wiretapping and surveillance were broad and widespread, not always centered on terrorists. Much of this was done by contractors outside the reach of military law. Under the Bush administration, the Constitution was ignored with impunity. The President himself was often referred to as the Commander-in-Chief for everybody, not just the military. All of this was approved by and happened under a supposedly conservative administration. Clearly, something was changing. Since the election of Barack Hussein Obama, the trend of accumulation of power into the office of the President of the United States has become unprecedented. Another attack of terrorism on the United States may make a national police force and adherence to the President rather than the Constitution by our armed forces a reality. From the war on terror to domestic surveillance and wiretapping, the Obama administration has not reversed a single significant policy of the previous administration. In fact, it has gone farther. Large sectors of the economy have been taken over by the government. Dozens of czars have been appointed with nearly dictatorial powers. Celebrities have come forward in support.
I pledge. I pledge. I pledge. I pledge. I pledge.
To be the change.
To be the change.
I pledge.
To be a servant to our president.
And all mankind.
Because together we can.
Together we are.
And
together we will be the change that we seek.
Note that these Hollywood personalities are saying, I pledge to be a servant to the President and to all mankind. Never in the history of the United States have we had a similar situation where people are being asked to pledge to be a servant to the President or any public official. Youth across the country are being indoctrinated by their own teachers or others to sing hymns of praise to President Obama.
We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em. We're gonna change it and rearrange it. We're gonna change the world. Yes, we can. 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 Yes, we can.
Oh, me. Oh, me. Oh, me. Oh, me. Oh, me. Obama speaks our race to America. Yes, we can. Embrace the burdens of our past, down the ridiculous of our past. Yes, we can.
The chant Alpha Omega by these young men in camouflage pants and boots refers to the book of Revelation and the messianic idea of Obama being the beginning and the end. I myself have witnessed a small child at one of our major airline hubs chanting over and over again, Obama speaks, before an adoring mother. The child had obviously been indoctrinated either by his mother or his school. A recent edition of the New American magazine showed a book that has been published to indoctrinate school children with the idea that Obama is God's messenger. It is all reminiscent of a classroom in Germany in the 1930s. The original intent of Obama's address to the school children of America in early September was to garner the same type of response of the I Pledge video from the celebrities. Once the speech was announced and the lesson plans revealed, what ensued was an outcry that caused the White House to tone down the speech into glittering generalities about studying and doing their homework. A lesson plan, as it was to be read in the original, stated, quote, "Write letters to themselves about what they can do to help the president," unquote. Then the children were to post signs around the classroom to show their support of the president and their goals towards that process. The proposed plan was a violation of federal law to begin with. And with a rise in resistance by many concerned Americans, the Obama administration is moving forward more cautiously. Currently, there is a move to have all student loans come from government. If this happens, the so-called voluntary youth service may become a mandatory part of getting these loans sooner or later. The appointment of a new Undersecretary of Education in 2009 is another critical step. As one of Obama's new czars, Kevin Jennings, is in charge of the Safe Schools program to stop bullying on the school grounds and to stop drug use. He is a long-time activist in the homosexual movement. He wrote the foreword to the book, Queering Elementary Education, and has long been active in school programs to not only get children to accept homosexuality, but to celebrate it. He has admitted that the use of promoting safety in the schools is a political device to promote homosexuality, and Jennings has enabled hundreds of schools to institute annual pro-homosexual programming as the founder and executive director of the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. Hitler had his homosexual youth leaders. Hitler himself hid his own homosexuality and that of his chief lieutenants from the German people. Even today, it is a relatively unknown fact. We see in Jennings the standard tactic of the homosexual agenda: go where the children are and recruit, not only into the homosexual lifestyle, but to organize them as well into workers for the state. Jennings is not simply for the tolerance of the homosexual lifestyle. He wants to suppress the religious right in the process, saying that they can drop dead. Those are the mildest of the words he has used. Tolerance to these people is a one-way street, for they have zero tolerance of moral people. Once they have organized these youth, they have always turned them loose on moral people and opponents of the state. Appointments by czars and other high officials by Obama have included open communists, militant socialists, as well as many tax cheats. Anita Dunn, the communications director for the White House, recently made the following remarks. Regarding the Obama election campaign, she stated,
"Increasingly, by the general election, very rarely did we communicate through the press anything that we didn't absolutely control."
I'm sure this remains policy today. President Obama has appointed Mr. Cass Sunstein as the Czar of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. As a Harvard law professor, Mr. Sunstein actually advocated in a paper he wrote that the government send agents into organizations that believe a conspiracy exists within the government, thereby neutralizing those organizations. What right has the government got to affect the opinions of the American people? If such a thing were to happen, it would be a direct attack on the First Amendment of free speech. Does the Constitution or the American people give the right to the president to take over the banks through massive amounts of public funds? Does the president have the right to change the CEOs of automobile companies or financial institutions? Where does the Constitution give the right to the president to broker financial institutions to be absorbed into other companies such as Morgan Chase? What we are seeing is the process of merging economic systems as outlined in a conversation between Norman Dodd of the Reese Committee and H. Rowan Gaither of the Ford Foundation.
I said, "Yes, Mr. Gaither, I'd like very much to know." Whereupon he made this statement to me, namely, "Mr. Dodd, we here operate on in response to similar directives, the substance of which is that we shall use our grant-making power so to alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union.
While the Reese Committee may be history, a recent admission surfaced showing that the process continues in an agreement signed by Bush and Putin and continued by Obama. This agreement specifically states that we are partners with Russia and that we will move to economically integrate. Two countries cannot economically integrate unless the government controls the banking system. This has begun with the so-called bank bailouts. The passage of the so-called health care bill has international ramifications. Two or more countries cannot merge if one has a free enterprise medical system while the others have a socialist system. One has to give way to the other. It is all part of preparing our country to be merged into an international system. In early September, the Wall Street Journal revealed that the White House was considering using an executive order to move malpractice suits out of the court system into a system of special panels and arbitrators. If he has the power to do that and get away with it, why even bother with a Congress? Soviet dictator Vladimir Lenin once said, quote, "Socialized medicine is the keystone to the arch of the socialist state," unquote. Why then did the Obama administration push so hard for socialized health care? Is it because it is good for America, or is it because it is so important to the socialist agenda? In socialized medicine, government bureaucrats or czars not only control the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, the aides, they also control the patient. In addition, socialized medicine will also start to control the food supply and vitamins, since we are what we eat. The argument will be that since the health of the nation is at stake, with increased burdens on the people for health care, the government will have to step in and control even what we are able to consume. The fear of not getting treatment for oneself or a loved one will make most of the citizenry compliant to government. After all, if an American citizen complains, then he or his children or his parents might be sent to the back of the line. The Bolsheviks used government-sponsored terrorism and a healthcare system to communize Russia. We see parallels in the war on terrorism and the healthcare initiatives of today. We are also witnessing the move toward a national police force run out of the White House. Obama has recommended such a thing.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
The idea of a national civilian security force, fully funded and comparable in size to the armed forces, is frightening when you consider that this was the security force that Hitler had in the brown shirts and the Hitler Youth, then the Gestapo. There's much more evidence that the abuse of presidential authority over the past several decades is creating a force similar to what Hitler and Stalin built. They justify this by telling us it is for our security. We know that Vice President Joseph Biden has written and spoken often for the establishment of the New World Order. So it is no surprise that he is ecstatic over the security team Obama has put together.
Well, Mr. President, you've assembled quite a team, and I hope and believe that the American people will come to feel, as I do, that we brought together one of the most talented national security teams ever assembled.
It all is being put together in the name of security. On a national and international scale, we see that security is a euphemism for growing government power over the American people. And we see no real opposition from the Republicans in Washington, D.C. Senator Lindsey Graham, for instance, in a recent interview with The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, called Obama a good man, and anyone who believes in conspiracy theories is crazy, emphasizing crazy. First, they malign the political opposition. Once they are denigrated in the public mind, they deal with them. The bottom line is this. The insiders are obviously accelerating their program to capture the entire fabric of American society and government. Hitler denigrated segments of the German population before he was able to eliminate them. This started with his political opposition's leadership being sent to Dachau. Then it was the infirm. Finally, it was whole races such as the Jews, all from the use of a government hungry for power, absolute power. Frankly, if we do not accelerate our program, we will lose our freedom. The time to act is now. It will mean sacrifice to a level we have not called upon our people to participate in before. But if we do not do it now, when will we? We have plans to accelerate our program. There is hope. The person showing you this DVD will discuss these plans with you, or you may go to jbs.org for further information.